What's going on, guys? Alex here with TFL Bike with some breaking news because BMW just refreshed their R1250RT. This new bike has an all-new look and, more importantly, tons of tech, and BMW is really aiming at Ducati. The battle for who gets radar sensing first is on, so we're going to get to that at the end of this video. Believe it or not, the R1250RT is actually on the lower end of the spectrum of touring bikes. Of course, BMW has the K1600 and all the bikes that fall into that family. That uses their straight six. This is a little bit different. This uses their 1254cc boxer engine with BMW shift cam technology, which is basically variable valve timing. It's unchanged from last year, so you're getting the exact same motor you got in the 2020 model, 136 horsepower and 105 foot-pounds of torque. So there's an all-new style and look to this bike. It looks very similar to last year's, but they did revise a few things, mainly in the front end. It's way more aggressive now, just looks a little more angular, less bubbly than last year, but all in all, it's still a pretty similar looking bike. They did revise some of the fairings here and there, but like I said, it looks very similar to last year's. To go along with the new front end, there's also a brand new headlight, and this is a really cool system. Actually, in the center of the headlight, there's a turn assist light. So this actually pivots side to side. So when you lean the bike over, it's going to turn that light and allow you to see further around the corner. A lot of bikes or a lot of headlights have been doing this for a while, but they kind of just light up one side of the headlight. This actually turns as you roll through the turn. So really cool tech there. I'd be really curious to try that out. Okay, so let's get to some of the tech. A lot of this has become pretty standard in the last few years in motorcycles, but we'll breeze through some of it. ABS Pro is now standard on the R1250RT, and this is an interesting system that a lot of cruiser bikes have had for a long time, but basically it's a smart ABS system, so it's going to take into account your lean angle and make sure that it's applying the brakes safely, but it also is going to use the front lever or the rear foot brake to control both brakes. So if you only push down on that rear foot brake, it's actually still going to apply braking power to that front wheel and vice versa. So you don't need to be, as focused on your braking. You're going to spend a lot of time on a touring bike like this, and you want some of those things to be a little more mindless. So that should help you out with that. The Pro Ride modes are still an option, but they still don't come standard, so still something you have to add onto the bike. There is one new ride mode, which is dynamic, and then also Eco mode, which was on last year's bike, but Eco mode is now standard, so not something you're going to have to add on. There's also a brand new engine drag torque control system, and what that's going to do is basically make it so the back wheel doesn't lock up and make so you don't have brake slippage, and that's going to be, in scenarios where you're coasting downhill or downshifting, it's just going to make it a little bit harder for that back wheel to lock up and cause the brakes to skid out. Dynamic traction control is now standard, and hill start, just like last year, is an option that you can get on this bike. And those are some of kind of the basic rider aids that are really cool to see on a new bike, but to be honest, they've been becoming standard for years now, and we should start to see a lot of that stuff standard on new bikes. So not huge news there. Let's get to the more exciting stuff. There's also a brand new 10.25-inch TFT display up front, full color. I really like what BMW's been doing with their displays. I think they're the best in the industry. The S1K and the M1K, I've always thought those displays were gorgeous, and this bike, the R1250RT, is no exception. It's a huge screen, and it's actually the first motorcycle that's able to display both a GPS map and all the info from your cluster, like your speedometer and your tach, at the same time on the stock screen without having some sort of secondary display. So that's super cool. There's also a new audio system. They call it Audio System 2.0. Super creative name, but that's just supposed to sound a little bit better than last year's speaker system. And there's also a new intelligent emergency call system. So if you get into an accident, the bike will be able to call emergency services for you. All right, guys, now let's get to the radar war. This is the conversation I really wanted to have with you guys. For about the past month, Ducati has been teasing their new Multistrada, which is the bike that would directly compete with this touring bike. And they've been kind of showing some images of their new radar system. They have a radar sensor both on the front and the back of the bike for adaptive cruise control and also for blind spot monitoring. Ducati was the first motorcycle manufacturer to bring that sort of technology to the market, and just a couple days later, here BMW is showing off basically the same system, also using Bosch sensors. Now the system on the BMW will work from 18 to 99 miles an hour, and it works just like you'd expect it to work in a car. So there's a little button up by your handlebar. You click that. It will change the distance that you want between you and the vehicle in front of you. And it should just make it easy to put lots of highway miles on this kind of system. Now what's interesting here is on the BMW, they're only putting a radar system up front, so only for adaptive cruise control. There's no blind spot monitoring on this bike. However, the new Multistrada is supposed to have blind spot monitoring, but we're still about half a month out from learning all the details on the new Multistrada. So really, I just wanted to kind of ask you guys a couple questions about radar systems on motorcycles. I definitely have a couple questions about it. Probably my biggest question is, how does it work when you're following other bikes? I would assume that it's pretty good at following trucks and cars, but what about if you're riding in a staggered position on the highway? How does it pick up different motorcycles that might be in front of you? So that's kind of my biggest question on that kind of system right now. Also, just in terms of the blind spot monitoring on the Ducati, same question there. Does it pick up bikes, or is it just picking up bigger objects like cars? So I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on radar sensing both adaptive cruise control and blind spot monitoring on motorcycles. I know some people are going to be torn between, your life is on the line on the bike. Do you want to trust the radar system, or are you still going to do a mirror and a head check every time you change lanes or need to make a turn? I'm kind of in the middle. I probably always will be that kind of rider that's going to do a manual head check, but at the same time, I'm definitely a huge fan of tech, and I think there's no downside to having blind spot monitoring and adaptive cruise control unless you're riding on the track and you're trying to shed weight. But on the road, there's no downside. I'd be excited to try it out depending on how it works, but I don't think I'd be ready to rely on it quite yet till I used it a bunch and really had some confidence in it. So let me know what your thoughts are on radar systems down in the comments below. We now have two bikes, the Multistrada and the new R1250RT from BMW. And they're both using the same kind of technology, so I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that. As far as colors for this new BMW R1250RT, there is kind of the base model, which comes in a pure white. There's also a brown, which looks pretty cool, the blue, which I'm also a pretty big fan of, and then there's more of a metallic white with a graphics package on it. Not a huge fan of the look of that one, but I do think the brown and the blue look really good. BMW has not announced pricing or availability on this bike quite yet, so you'll have to stay tuned for that. We do know it's going to be a 2021 model year, and the outgoing bike, the 2020, had an MSRP starting at $18,645, so that should give you an idea of where this bike is going to start. I would imagine the price might bump up a little bit from there, but it shouldn't go too much higher. That's all for now, guys. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to let me know your thoughts on all these new radar systems down in the comments below. We'll see you in the next one.